Hello, hello. Welcome to Prophecy Roundtable. Tonight, of course, as always, we are going to take a look at things prophetic. Hey, guys, we don't have all the answers, but we're going to take a look at what's going on in the world. We're going to say, what could that mean? Does it have any correlation to Scripture? Now, the challenge that we have is that sometimes there is a pretty clear correlation, and sometimes we don't really know. And is correlation the same as causation, right? That's the real question. So, take everything with maybe a grain or 2 grains of salt. We'll do our best to present the best that we can see. And of course, what we're going to do together is keep our eyes open. Why is this important? Why even take the time to do this? Well, God wrote, the Bible, right? And he spent about roughly 30% of that is, Scripture is prophecy. And most of that is about the end times, about the return of Christ and what the world is going to look like before that. All right, so that is super important. Now, just before we get to our show, I want to invite you to join me this coming Shabbat, this coming Saturday, all right here on this channel. I'm going to be teaching through Ezekiel chapter 28, in case you haven't been up to speed. That is an amazing chapter that talks about the origin of Satan. I started on it last week. I'm going to continue this week. All right, it's called Satan's Pride and Many Faces. All right, so I think you will really enjoy that. So it's kind of apropos to what we're talking about today. So again, join me. You can join it right here on the Douglas Ministries channel. I hope you do. And of course, if you're in the Denver area, please come see us. We are in Lakewood. Just look us up, the Way Congregation, and you can check us out there. All right, without further ado, I have my amazing and intrepid co-hosts with me. We have Joel and we have Scott. Guys, great to see you guys. So we're talking about battling evil in dark days. Boy, does the Bible have anything to say about evil in the last days? I mean, I would think so. I mean, Jesus talked about how it's going to be like in the days of Noah at the coming of the Son of Man. I mean, that right there is incredibly significant. The book of Revelation talks about Babylon, the woman that rides the beast. It talks about a fiery red dragon that's going to deceive the whole world. Then it talks about a beast who's going to rise up out of the sea. Now, obviously, part of the challenge is sometimes these things are not literal. Many of these things are not literal. They're more metaphors or they're imagery that we have to then try to understand. That's the fun and the challenge of the book of Revelation. But when we start to kind of think of these things in our own modern world, we start to get a picture, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So, where do you guys feel that we are with the dark days and battling the evil in these last days?
Okay, let's hope that Bill found the invite this time. I'm going to work on that one. Okay, guys, I'm going to be quiet and mute myself, and I'm going to work on getting Bill on the show.
Okay, well, our guest has not shown up yet, but that's okay. It's not a problem. What I would like to do, since our guest is not quite here, let's go ahead and just talk about a passage in Scripture. So I want to open up Revelation chapter 17. I'm going to pull this up on the screen so that we can take a look at it. Among others, we'll take a look at a few scriptures, and I think that will give us really something fun to talk about, because there's all kinds of amazing stuff in Scripture that is really no shortage of weird stuff and cool stuff, right? So yeah, that's part of our fun. Okay, so we have one of the 7 angels who had poured out the 7 bowls came over and spoke to me. Come with me, he said, and I will show you the judgment that is going to come on the great prostitute who sits on many waters. The rulers of the world have had immoral relations with her, and the people who belong to this world have been made drunk by the wine of her immorality. So the angel took me in spirit into the wilderness. There I saw a woman riding on a scarlet beast that had 7 heads and 10 horns, written all over with blasphemies against God. She wore purple and scarlet clothing and beautiful jewelry made of gold and precious gems and pearls. She held in her hand a gold goblet full of obscenities and the impurities of her immorality. A mysterious name was written on her forehead: Babylon the Great, mother of all prostitutes and obscenities of the world. All right, let's stop right there, because there is a ton of amazing stuff that we can take a look at, and really do need to take a look at, because there's a lot in there. So, okay, so this is kind of my thing. When I come to this chapter, I know it's really popular to start looking at, but there is so much in scripture and ancient history that talks about who this woman is very specifically. It's talking about Ishtar or Inanna. She was the woman that rode the beast. I'm going to pull up a picture here in just a second so that you guys can see what this ancient iconography actually was of this this prostitute. All right, and she was known as the mother of prostitutes, right? That was her bold and brazen title. Like, it was something that she actually wore with a lot of pride, is that she was the mother of harlots, or the mother of prostitutes. Of course, that we're talking about Babylon, I think is very, very significant. Now, Babylon as a world system has, of course, spread throughout the world, throughout the globe, to be specific. Okay, and that this is I just want to make that really clear. Okay. So yeah, so this has gone throughout the world, and it's morphed into different names. She has different names wherever she may go. She's known as Astarte in some places. She's known as Aphrodite. She's known as Durga, but always the same basic traits no matter where she goes. And so that is super significant. And
Time out for a second, please. Sorry.
yeah.
Scott, can you grab the link from StreamYard and send it to him? He's saying it's not a good link. It's taking him to a dead meeting. So I've sent him 2 of the correct links, but he's not getting into our meeting.
Yeah, I can try.
All right, thank you. Sorry, Doug.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, so what we have then is this woman that appears throughout the ancient world, showing up again and again and again. And when we see her, I think we have to interpret this passage of scripture in light of that. Otherwise, we are going to miss some of the really amazing things, as we're taking a look at that. So, yeah, what do you think about that, Joel?
I think I want Bill on the show. so we invited Bill tonight, and Bill's been on a few months ago. I must have sent him the wrong link, but then again, no, you're not joining that way. You're going through StreamYard. So anyway, the main thing is Scott will work on getting Bill on.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm trying to throw you a softball here, and
I wasn't really listening as well as I
should. Hey, we do
I'm
this show live, guys. That's all part of the fun. So what I'm going to do here, I want to show you here. So this is a picture of Durga. Okay, so this is the Indian version of the woman that rides the beast. All right, and when you then compare her with what we see in the ancient world, in the ancient Mesopotamian world of this woman that's riding the beast, well, I don't know about you, but my jaw just kind of dropped when I first saw it. Okay, so let me show you guys this, because it really is amazing. All right, so I'm pulling this up. Make sure it's big enough.
Remove myself.
Oh shoot, I just had it and it kind of went away. Isn't that funny? All right, so all right, here it is again. Hopefully you guys can see that. And it's not showing up. Isn't that quite annoying? It really is. All right, let me try again. So hold on. All right, here we go. And all right, so this right here, this is, hold on. All right, so this is Inanna Ishtar. All right, now look at that. This is what we call a cylinder seal. By the way, for all our flat Earth friends out there who are convinced that the Earth is like a seal, well, seals were not flat discs, but they were actually cylinders. You can see a cylinder right there. That's called a cylinder seal. It was kind of like a little movie, right? They would carve into this round seal, this round cylinder, what they would then roll on the clay, and then you can see the clay there. Right, so the cylinder seal is kind of like the negative, and the clay is essentially the positive. That's like the picture. All right, so on that beast there in the middle, that is Inanna or Ishtar. Okay, Inanna means the queen of heaven. When we look at Jeremiah, it talks about the queen of heaven. They're making cakes for the queen of heaven. That is Inanna, or in Akkadian, she was known as Ishtar. She becomes known as Ashtoreth or Astarte, right? Lots of different names, but all the same basic goddess. Now, who is she riding? This is so significant. She's riding Enlil. Now, Enlil is, in fact, Satan, all right? Satan, we find him in Isaiah chapter 14, how you've fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. Lucifer is a really unfortunate translation. That is Eosphoros in the Greek, but it's actually Hillel in the Hebrew, which translated back to, or you go back to Akkadian, you find Elil, and you take the Elil from Akkadian, you go back to Sumerian, you find Enlil, right? Enlil was Lord Wind. Paul talks about the prince of the power of the air. Enlil was the one who separated heaven and earth. He took earth as his portion. Anu, the creator god, took heaven as his portion, right? Enlil usurped the authority of Anu. Does this sound familiar at all? I mean, hello, right? And this is amazing, right? And so that being right there that you see, that beast in the middle, that is the Anzu bird. That's what it's technically called, the Anzu bird. And if you take a close look at that, you can see that it has eagle's talons in the back. It has kind of a lion-esque body. It has wings, of course. It has plumage. You can't really see it in this one because it's just a tiny little cylinder seal. But he has a scorpion's tail. He has a serpent head phallus. He's vomiting up poison, right? All of these are the same things that we find in Revelation chapter 9, right? Where it kind of looks like a manticore. Manticore is the same basic idea. These are all symbols of Satan. One of his epithets was death. Another was enmity. There is so many things. He was also known as the Great Red Dragon, right? I mean, it's just the list goes on and on and on. But here's the wild thing. Not only was that beast right there Enlil, but it was also the representation of his son, Ninurta. Ninurta is none other than Nimrod, who is probably also Amar-Ud, which means Gilgamesh, okay? And Gilgamesh means the exalted hero, the ancient hero. Again, lots of different names. You just have to trace the names. And if you have the same meanings, even though the word itself might be different, you find the same meaning or you find the same root in many cases, then you're dealing with the same entity. And we find that throughout the ancient world, talking about Nimrod, lots of different names. He was also known as Marduk, Martu, Martes, right, in Spanish, or Mars in English, or Latin, if you will. So again, we find these same characters, right? So Nimrod was known as the son of Enlil. Okay, that's amazing, right? We know that something happened to Nimrod in in Genesis chapter 10. It says that he became a Gibor. He became a mighty one, right? Something happened to him. He underwent some transformation. And so now this woman is riding on the back of the beast. That's really significant, right? So she is apparently driving. She's directing the beast, but is she? Or is she simply benefiting from the beast? Well, that's a hard one to say, isn't it? So that's kind of what we're talking about. So as we discuss this evening, and so we look at some of the newspaper clippings and say, could this be it, or could that be it? Maybe reserve a little bit of judgment, okay, because we don't fully know. But we go back to these things as our base and say, okay, here's what we really do know. We obviously know Scripture. Scripture is depicting things from the ancient world that were well known to the ancients. We're talking like 2000 BC. This right here is like 2100 BC. That's a really old cylinder seal. All right. That gives you an incredible basis. And of course, Nimrod was the one who established what city? Well, you guessed it, Babylon. Okay. Bab-el, the gate of the gods, right? Bab-ilani. He's the one who established that city. And it's no mistake. It's no fluke that God is so irate against that city. I personally do think it is going to be rebuilt. That's, of course, another show, another discussion. But in any event, the Babylonian system is going to come down. God is still upset about it because that is where false religion had its infancy. And he's going to take it out. So we have our guest on. I'm so excited
Bill?
about that. Dr.
Can
Bill,
you hear us?
welcome.
Say something.
Yep.
We're
Oh,
delighted
good.
you can join us.
We
So
worked
yeah,
so
why
hard
don't
to
you
get
take
this.
it from here? I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to share with us.
Well,
Yeah,
great.
Bill.
Good to be back.
Mhm.
Shalom.
Oh,
Shalom, shalom, welcome. Baruch haba.
Oh. Well, that was interesting, Doug. I've been doing a fair amount of looking at this whole phenomenon that happened in Paris, and there's just layers and layers of occult symbolism to it. And to start with, I mean, there's the most obvious stuff. We've got the whole thing of the depiction of the Last Supper blasphemously, and the what do you call it? The really overweight lesbian woman with the sunburst behind. Yeah, there you see her. With the sunburst behind her head. And of course, then later on, we have the nearly nude blue guy who's, well, I guess he'd be on my right, that represents Dionysos. But as you say there, there's relationships to, Azazel and to the great god Pan, quote unquote. They're all, all of these different deities have different names. I mean, he's also known as Bacchus in the Roman pantheon. So, the god of drunkenness and wine and debauchery and chaos. So here's some of the stuff. On one level, we've got this whole thing is followed. He has this weird song that he sings in French, and then it's followed by this, what I would call a Dionysian pseudo orgy, with all these different, I would imagine mostly gay or transvestite people, dancing suggestively with at least one little kid there. Just
Bill, is it the Ah He Kara song? Is that what you're talking about? Let's see. Is that the song that they
I
sing?
know I only have seen parts of the translation. I don't speak French, so
Okay.
But talking about the fact that if you're naked, you don't have any place to hide a gun except one spot, and that wouldn't be very smart. Which is really a stupid thing to say. But
Okay.
I hadn't heard of that, but I think there's a correlation there. I wouldn't be a bit surprised.
So basically what we're talking about, people, is that we have the horse that seems to be kind of greenish, kind of pale, according to many news sources. We have Marie Antoinette, which started off the beheadings, 10 months of 17,000 beheadings. And what they did was they lined up not just one of her holding her own head there, but about 18 of them, all singing this song, which was, here it is, she Ah Ka Ira, which is basically the demons singing, "It'll be fine, it'll be fine," as they beheaded 17,000 people. And Bill, that it seems like it's symbolic.
Mm-hmm. That I did not know about that. That's some good research there.
Here's why, Bill. Because they had this French metal band, death metal, singing the song with these 18 Marie Antoinettes holding their heads, and the Maries were all singing, and obviously her head wasn't where it was supposed to be. And so we're all listening to this and saying, this is telegraphing something. This is a message to us. This isn't just, hey, we're just having a little fun. I think they're mocking. I don't think that they're or cursing, but they're doing something.
Oh yeah. Well, not only that, but I was in that previous slide you just had up.
Yeah.
You said the name of the band was Gojira.
Yeah. What does that mean?
Well, that's interesting because that actually is the original word in Japanese for Godzilla.
Oh, wow.
giant. It literally, now this I didn't know about this particular facet of all this, but Gojira, as I understand it in I don't speak Japanese either, but it means ape whale. And originally the idea behind Godzilla, they just anglicized it when they made it into an American movie by putting Raymond Burr in it as the star, and it became a huge hit in America, but they called it Godzilla because most Americans couldn't say Gojira. But originally the idea was that Godzilla was a fusion, a mutation between a giant ape and a whale caused by a nuclear blast, that was haunting the Japanese consciousness even in the 1960s. So there's this weird idea again of two opposites coming together, the lizard thing, because obviously Godzilla is a modern form of Leviathan. He's
Okay. Yes, you've been warning about that for a month or two. So what's the warning?
Well, I think we're talking here, and let me back up a little bit, because that's actually the deeper level of what I think this whole thing is. Because okay, you've enumerated the first level of stuff, the pale horse, the orgy, the sodomites, and you added, thank you, the whole thing about that weird demonic song, Dionysos, all of that. Okay, you go deeper, and you have basically two, maybe more, but at least two of these archetypal figures. One is the lesbian with a sunburst behind her.
Sure.
That's obviously a goddess thing, but it's also a symbol of Apollo, the sun god.
Oh.
The Greek god Apollo.
Okay.
When you see, if you may use the word iconography of Apollo, he usually has this sunburst behind him. And of course, that also kind of worked its way into Christian iconography with the idea of the halo. And I'm sure that's what on one level they were trying to achieve, because she was supposed to represent Christ, whatever.
Right.
Then the other level of this same thing is that at the height of the French culture in the Middle Ages was the Sun King, who was Louis XIV. And he reigned from 1638 to 1715. And he basically took France to a level of both political and military power that it never really achieved again or before, at least until before Charlemagne. So, he was like this really bizarre figure. He's an iconographic figure. He was a very strong Catholic. And part of what he did in his reign was he really persecuted the Protestants in his kingdom. The Huguenots and other groups of Protestants, to the point that many of them had to flee the country. So he was very much kind of a Nibradian figure, if you will, antichrist figure. He was very debaucherous. He was very, opulent. He built the Palace of Versailles, which I'm sure most of you know is one of the most opulent palaces in all of Europe, on the back of the French taxpayers. And many people believe that his extravagant spending led, 60, 70 years later to the crushing of the French economy and the French Revolution, which of course you were just alluding to. So anyway, toward the middle of his reign, he began calling himself the Sun King. And he believed that he was the son of Apollo. He believed that he was like the center. He called himself the center of the universe. No ego problems there. And he basically said he was without equal. And he was very much into the arts and into ballet. And he would make ballets, create ballets, and then he would be in the ballets, and he would always play a godlike figure, either Neptune or Apollo or the sun. So he called himself the Sun King. And of course, his most famous quote is "L'état c'est moi," which means the state is me. I am the state. So this guy was a huge control freak and a huge egomaniac. And he ultimately probably led to the downfall of the French monarchy. Now the other thing is Dionysos. a lot of people understand on one level, oh, he's the god of wine, he's the god of orgies and all. You know, he is also the god of chaos. And he was worshipped in ancient times. I think it was Euripides wrote a play about this. It was a tragedy in more ways than one, about the Bacchae, which is the way they would worship Bacchus or Dionysus. And what they would do is, the certain season of the year, all the women would just go crazy. They would become very lustful. In a way, it's kind of weird. If you're into Star Trek, it was kind of like that one episode, The Return of the Archons, where one day out of the year, everybody goes crazy and rapes and kills and pillages and fornicates or whatever. And then everything goes back to this placid zombie-like state. Well, that's kind of what this was like, because in this drama, it is said that, you know, the women would run around. If they would encounter a man, they would fall upon him, you know, 8 or 10 women, and literally devour him. You know, cannibalism. They'd actually eat his genitalia. And there's a lot of symbolism in that, which if you want, we can get into. So this is the whole other thing. You've got Apollo and you've got Dionysos. Now, going one level deeper, you've got this idea. There was this satanic philosopher who most of you have heard of, Nietzsche. And in one of his writings, he talked about how all religions fit into one of two frameworks, either Dionysian or Apollonian. And he described these like he thought basically most of Christianity was very Apollonian. It was ordered, it was structured, it was reasoned, and it was moderate and temperate. And on the other hand, there were Dionysian rituals where there were these, you know, wild parties and orgies, and were basically whatever deity it was being worshipped with this kind of stuff. And, you know, so you've got this idea of the Dionysian energies and the Apollonian energies. And I think that, and of course, this boils down to the famous satanic Masonic motto of the 32nd degree of the Scottish Rite, which is Ordo ab Chao, order out of chaos. And that brings us to the final level. And there may be deeper levels. I don't know. I'm not saying this is the end all and the be all, but that's the idea that underneath these forces, these great cosmic forces of chaos and order, there are these two biblical monster archetypes, Leviathan, and we just mentioned that in regards to Godzilla, Leviathan, which is chaos, and Behemoth, which is authoritarianism. And that's the tension we're seeing right now in society. And I believe on a certain level, this whole thing was a magical rite designed to be observed, mind you, by millions, if not billions, because obviously the Olympics are one of the most huge media events in the world. And Satanists believe that the more people that are focused on a ritual that they're doing, that they can draw, even if it's over the internet or over television or whatever, that they can draw energy from that and feed it as a magical working toward their ends. And I believe in this case, they're trying to do this Ordo ab Chao thing. They're trying to raise the level of chaos, Dionysos, Leviathan, and raise it up to such a level. And the people, a lot of people are kind of starting to fall for this. That they're going to say, we want an authoritarian leader to put this under control. Whether it's all the riots that are going on in Europe, in the UK, all of this stuff. And of course, this could very well happen in America, depending on what goes on with our elections in the next few months. So they're working magical rituals here. And you can say, well, this doesn't have to work. Well, no, it doesn't, especially if believers are crying out to the Almighty, to the King of the universe, Yeshua HaMashiach, and pray and come against this stuff. And I've done a couple of videos on our YouTube channel about this whole dynamic of Leviathan and Behemoth, and how to take arms up against it. But
I love that you brought that in, because that's the Hegelian dialectic, and I think that is,
yeah.
I think that is the elephant in the room that we can often miss. There's the thesis, there's the antithesis, and then there's the synthesis, right? And so if you are on the thesis side, you're like, hey, this is the way it needs to be. If you're on the antithesis side, you're like, no, this is how it needs to be. But the whole point is to create this chaos so that you come up with something different, right? A synthesis between the two. And I really think you nailed, you nailed it on the head there, where you have these two opposing parties. Let's just take here in America. I live in America, right?
Let's take Kamala and Trump. If you can't see
exactly.
the thesis and the antithesis creating the friction and the chaos between a liberal communist and a person with authoritarian
bent
tendencies, who the leftists have a reason to be legitimately concerned, in my opinion. And those who are worried about Kamala taking this country even to more socialist ideas and etc. Everyone has a right to be concerned. And it's like, these are like countries get the leaders they deserve. And here's where we are, people.
Exactly.
So I call it agitation. And you're saying, no, this is systematic. This is ordo, whatever, it's chaos. Okay, all right, fine. I can smell the agitation, guys.
And here's the thing: is certainly Trump doesn't know about it. Kamala doesn't know about it. They don't realize that they are pawns in this greater thing, right? So that's the thing. The people that are playing people are also being played, right? And so we're all getting played in one way or another. Right. And, I was just going through Revelation today, and it talks about the serpent that deceives the whole world. Now, as a Christian, I'm like, yeah, except us Christians. Right. But then I'm like, wait a second, the whole world, could that include little me? Like, could I be part of the, could I be one of the people that's getting snowballed here? And I'm like, I think so, because one, I'm not that smart. Two, Satan's really clever. All right. He's incredibly clever. He was full of wisdom, right? He wasn't like half full when God made him. He was full of wisdom. Like, that's a lot of wisdom, guys. So, we've got to be incredibly careful. And this is where we get into the Hegelian dialectic, and we start thinking, well, my side is the good side versus the other side, which is the bad side, and I go back to Jesus talking about the Good Samaritan. Look, the Samaritans were good for nothing half-breeds who had really bad theology. All right. Let's be really clear about that. They had bad theology, right? And they would not have passed a theology exam. But you know what? When it came to good deeds, Jesus seemed to think they were pretty cool. And, this is where we get into that same dialectic. Is like, well, hey, I'm the good Pharisee who's got good theology. I'm not like that Samaritan over there. And Jesus is like, well, yeah, but who was the good neighbor? Right. And so this is where we've got to take, maybe 2 or 3, maybe 10 pills of humility. Right. So that we don't start thinking me and my side, we've got it all figured out. Because look, I sure don't. And I'm suspecting that a lot of us don't. Okay. And if we'll stay humble and we'll keep praying, and we'll keep praying that God will do his will, not what we think his will is for this country, but truly his will. And I mean, it's hard because I have my opinions, okay, and I kind of like, go this way, Lord, but thankfully God is even, he's a lot smarter than me. He's like a gazillion times smarter, and I'm happy about that. So that's what I would suggest. And so, Bill, I think you're really giving us some great stuff. So please go on.
Well, one thing it's interesting. Yeah, I totally agree what you're saying. Many years ago, I did a teaching called "Our Side, Their Side, God's Side." And it happened to be during that awful Kosovo war, back in the early, I think it was during the Clinton administration. And, I called people to mind that thing in Joshua where he encounters this angel of the Lord, quote unquote. And he says, are you on our side or their side? And he says, no, I'm on God's side, to paraphrase. And that's what we need to pray, that we would be on his side, not that he would be on our side.
Agreed.
Yeah, amen. I totally with you. I love that one because we really can get into this sense that God's sort of doing our bidding. God's clearly a hardcore Republican or whatever color you want to choose, and you can start thinking God is on your side, and God is far, far, far bigger than that. So, yeah, awesome. Well, please go on. This is really interesting.
Well, that was based. I mean, Joel said he had a few symbolic things to throw at me.
Let's do some more symbolism here.
Yeah,
so,
all right.
So we've got Aleister Crowley on the left-hand side and a Phrygian cap. Okay, so that's a tri-sided cap. Okay. Then during the Olympics here, the little kiddies were getting these Phrygian caps. So you can see it just below Aleister Crowley. And so they're showing us that type of a cap that seems to have symbolism behind it. Rich.
Excuse me.
Go.
I'm relying on my memory here.
Yeah.
But as I recall, the Phrygian cap was what the zealots of the French Revolution wore.
That's what I'm sensing, Bill.
And it was like the sign. Okay, we're against the monarchy. We're in, the great battle cry of the French Revolution: liberty, equality, fraternity. And we're hearing something very similar to that now from the Democratic Party. This whole idea of diversity, equity, and whatever it is, inclusivity. The same idea. But I think now why Crowley was wearing that hat, I don't know. I'm sure he had a reason, because that's one of the most famous photographs of him. And he may very well have been identifying with the forces of chaos. Because, the French Revolution was like if you will, the flip side of the American Revolution, because it was godless. I mean, they basically, whatever you think of the Catholic Church, they ripped the Catholic Church to shred. They murdered, thousands of nuns and priests and monks or whatever, desecrated cathedrals. They enthroned a naked woman, a whore, on the great altar of Notre Dame Cathedral. This is all the French Revolution.
What year was that? Was that 1789 or 93?
Yeah, it was in the late 1780, 89 through, I think it was actually.
I do not remember that.
And like many of those things, it kind of just, I know I've heard people saying nowadays, well, socialists tend to eat their own, and that's kind of what happened, because with the French Revolution, the guys that started it, that were the great philosophers of it, like Jean-Paul Marat, ended up, being murdered or guillotined. I mean, I think he ended up in an insane asylum, Marat, but it was just a horrible thing. And it was because they forsook, they didn't go after the biblical thing, and instead they went after the godless, way that they did. And as a result, it was called the Reign of Terror for a reason.
What's really interesting is if you go back to Neo-Babylonian times, so this is, roughly Nebuchadnezzar's time, you have Marduk, who slays Tiamat. Okay, so Tiamat is the goddess of chaos. He then takes her body, splits her down the middle, okay, and half of it becomes the sky and the other half becomes the earth. All right. So it's really interesting that Marduk, okay, is going to destroy chaos, right? He creates earth according to his own pattern out of chaos. Now, who in the world is Marduk? Well, remember those pictures I was just showing you guys, right? The woman that rides the beast, right? It's both Enlil, Satan, and it is Nimrod. Now, if you listen carefully, right? Nimrod, right? Mem, Resh, Dalet, same as Marduk. Okay, you have the same exact letters. And what does it mean? It means let's rebel. Okay, so the rebel is saying, I'm going to create order out of chaos. Of course, who brought the chaos in the first place? Well, it was him, right? But he's going to create order out of this chaos according to his own, his own ingredients and his own formula, basically. So again, it's interesting to look at it in light of the French Revolution. It's interesting to look at it in light of the Romans and the Greeks, but it goes all the way back to the very beginning when we go back to Enlil, and we understand that was, of course, Satan who threw the monkey wrench in the first place, and that's what got everything messed up. But Satan doesn't necessarily want utter chaos. He wants order, but order according to his own ideas, basically.
Exactly. And it's interesting if you look at, like some of these people that are like really into the anthropology of religion and religious history, like, Joiun, Joseph Campbell, people like that, they will identify Marduk down through the years with Apollo, because he is the person that brought, as you say, by, splitting the dragon of chaos, he brought order to the universe. And he's kind of like the sun god figure. And you go through, of course, you got Osiris in Egypt, and then you've got Apollo in Greece. And you don't have to follow that train very long. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of correlation there.
Speaking of Apollo, Trump seems to really like Apollo in his apartment in New York.
What do you mean by that, Scott?
Well, it's like there's gold and opulence everywhere, and there's paintings of Apollo and statues of Apollo. I'm just saying the symbolism is there. Not saying Trump's the little horn or the Antichrist or the beast or anything like that, but again, he did attend a Jesuit university, and he does sit there with a little symbol every time he sits down with the upside down triangle. Now that could just be a habit. I don't believe so. So
no, we do need to talk about that, Bill. Yeah,
I've had people ask me if he's like, and I don't know for sure, but a lot of these things, like people have come at me because I've occasionally used this symbol. Oh, you're a little, all this stuff, or even going like this, I mean, I talk with my hands, I'm Jewish, so there you go. And it's like, sometimes, like, at the risk of quoting Sigmund Freud, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. And I don't really think that, just because Trump does certain gestures or whatever, I don't think that means he's, in the Illuminati. It seems to me like he's pretty much wrecking everything the Illuminati is trying to do.
Is Trump
do you think that's part of the antithesis, though? Do you think that could be the dark versus the light? That he could be carrying the symbol for the light against the evil cabal, the New World Order, the globalist agenda, and set up against this is this champion for nationalism, and biblical, allegedly biblical values. Although I still don't think Trump has actually really opened his Bible much.
Well, yeah,
I don't know.
I guess, I don't know for sure, obviously. I mean, I think his taste is rather garish. I mean, I have seen pictures of his, penthouse apartment at Trump Tower, and to me, it just looks garish. It looks kind of like nouveau riche stuff, but I don't know. I mean, nobody knows for sure what's in his heart, but I think, that to me, I've had many people say, is he a Freemason? Back in 2016, when he was running, I dug into that pretty deeply, and I could find no evidence of it, because usually somebody like him, who at that time, he was an industrialist, a real estate developer, he'd have no reason to conceal that he was a Freemason, because Freemasonry is a way that businessmen make connections. They make alliances. And I don't know why he would, aside, people say, oh, he made a handshake. Well, first of all, there's 32 Masonic handshakes, ways in which Masons can identify one another. So, it's awful hard to shake somebody's hand and not have it be a Masonic handshake, just because there's only so many ways you can shake somebody's hand. So I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, but that's just me. I have seen no evidence that he's either a Freemason or an Illuminist or anything like that.
And my thing is, irrespective, I do believe we touched on it briefly, or at least Doug mentioned it, that the people, the head puppets, because I refuse to call them the head puppeteers, the head puppets that think they run this world, the humans, I call them the head puppets. Trump would be way below, like at least 2 or 3 rungs below their level, if not further. So that's sort of how I view it. I don't know who the head puppets are. I mean, I've got speculation. You
well,
probably
let me explain that, okay? Because in my book, Masonry Beyond the Light, which came out like almost a quarter century ago, I talk about what goes on with the icon of the Great Seal of the United States, the reverse. You got the pyramid with the all-seeing eye. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. Well, those ranks of that pyramid all represent layers of the cabal, whatever you want to call it. And at the bottom are Blue Lodge Masons. And you go up and up and up, and I'm not going to get into all of it, but at the top, near the top, you have what were called, and when I was in the Illuminati, the 9 unknown men. And these are powers behind the scenes that hardly anybody knows who they are, but they rule. One of those men is behind North America, South America, Europe, England, Asia, and there, believe it or not, there's one that's over Israel.
I would believe that.
And so there's 9 unknown men, one for every continent plus one for Israel. And anyway, they call the shots. Now, they're human beings, but they're like demon possessed to the eyeballs, because I had one of them, the North American guy, as my mentor. And above them are what is called the 7. And those 7 are fallen angelic beings. Now, I don't know what your theology is about fallen angels, but I really believe there are, walking around today, just as there were in Genesis 6, fallen angels. So anyway, they are right underneath Lucifer. Lucifer is at the very top. He's the top of the pyramid, the Utchut eye, the all-seeing eye, that kind of thing. So that's how the hierarchy works. So you're right. The leaders of various nation states, even powerful ones like, America or whatever, they're like 5 or 6 layers underneath the big shots.
Bill, I had heard it stated as 3 and 13 and 33. Am I wrong?
Well, I think that's a John Todd thing.
Oh,
you know
okay.
who John Todd was, right?
Vaguely.
Well, yeah, he was a contemporary of mine, and he claimed to be in this hereditary witch satanic family, the Collins family, and he got saved. And I don't doubt his testimony up to a point. But as he was going around preaching and warning, he was the first person really to warn evangelical Christians about the occult and the dangers of things like, divination and Ouija boards and stuff like that. Nobody was really talking about that prior to the late 60s and early 70s. It just wasn't a thing. And he made that very, very popular. He was featured in a chick comic book. And, but unfortunately, he got more, and his story got more and more inflated as he kept going. And he ended up getting in trouble. Jack Chick, who was a friend of mine, blessed memory, he told me he kept trying to tell John Todd to get under a pastor and, get discipled. But he wouldn't really do that. He just wanted to go out and get the word out, quote unquote, which is in a way admirable, but it's not really wise. And so he ended up getting in trouble with a young girl that was underage. And, he ended up getting thrown in prison. And of course, he claimed it was because he was telling the truth about the Illuminati. And I think he was murdered in prison. But he promoted the idea of there being this Council of 13. And, there's these 13 Illuminati bloodlines, which I forget if it was Dot Marquis or somebody. No, it was the other guy. I'm sorry, I'm not remembering the name of the fellow. But anyway, that's all kind of iffy. Because when I was in Satanism, and when I was even in the lower levels of the Illuminati, they actually knew about him. And they said, we don't even know who this guy is. Amongst ourselves as devil worshippers, we just saw that the guy was basically a low-level witch who got become a Christian, hallelujah. But So I don't know. I mean, I obviously have never been in the highest levels of the Illuminati. All I know is I was told there are these 9 unknown men, one of whom was my mentor, and then above them are the 7, and then above them is the 1, who of course is Lucifer.
So, Bill.
Well, I'm really curious, if I could,
Yeah.
Bill, really curious, since you were a Satanist for a long time. Had you ever heard of Enlil? I mean, was that a name that ever came up?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Okay.
In fact, that features very prominently in the Necronomicon. I don't know if you've heard of that or not.
No idea what that.
Please go on.
Well, it's a supposedly mythic black magic occult ritual book of the highest order, or the lowest order, depending on how you look at it. And it literally means the book of the songs or the laws of the dead. And it was originally not intended for, and it was never published until the late, I think it was the late 70s. Somebody published a bowdlerized version of it. They published 666 copies of a limited edition. I was given one. And it's interesting because the dedication says, Ad Maiorem Dei Gloriam. Sorry, Ad Crowley Dei Gloriam. In other words, for the glory of Crowley. And if you look at this book, and it's by all means very bowdlerized, the worst parts are not in it, but there's all of these invocations to the very Babylonian / Sumerian deities that you're talking about. Enlil, Marduk, Enka, all of these different, they have sigils, occult designs for invoking them. And I'll tell you a true story about it. The guy that was running the occult bookstore, this is in Milwaukee, where I was running a 2 or 3 witch covens at that time, just locally. He told me that he had sold a copy. He had 2 copies of this book, and he sold a copy to one fellow who was a high-level Satanist. And he took it home, showed it to his wife and his little daughter. Little daughter excused herself from the table, went into the bathroom and cut her wrists and killed herself. Just like that. So the guy brought the book back. He felt it was a cursed book. So the guy didn't tell anybody about this, the bookstore owner, because this is an expensive book. This is like a $150 book, and this was in the late 70s. Another guy bought the book. He happened to live in a high-rise above Lake Michigan, like 15 or 20 stories up, typical modern, thing. And he brought it in the door. He had this pet that was a black cat. The black cat took one look at the book, started howling and screaming like it was demon possessed, started running around in circles, and then ran right through a tempered glass window and fell to its death like, 20 or 30 stories. So he took the book back. And that's this book. And there's all this stuff in it about Enlil and all these different, Babylonian deities, the Anunnaki and all of this stuff. So yes, it's very common in high-level Satanism. You don't hear about it so much down on the level of like the Church of Satan type people.
Okay.
We used to call them the comic opera Satanists because they're mostly show and not into the really deep stuff.
Wow. That's really interesting. Because I think it is sort of easy to dismiss, the Satan with the pitchfork thing pretty easily, because it is a comic. It's a comic book. It's just kind of making fun of that whole idea. When people really start to get into what's really going on, I mean, that's pretty crazy. How do you think the ancient people actually knew what Enlil looked like? Because the reason I think that they were accurate is because the book of Revelation describes those things, right? It describes a woman riding a beast. Like, how in the world did John know that? Well, God told him. But how did the ancient people know that, who didn't communicate with God, but they somehow knew about this woman riding a beast? I mean, there's something pretty wild about that.
I mean, in just my 16 years in the occult, I had countless visions of demonic beings that were as real looking at it as you are to me now. Not even taking drugs at the time, although I did my share of that too. And of course, we cannot forget the fact that in ancient, these ancient pagan religions, there was a lot of use of hallucinogenic, substances too.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of speculation about the Oracle of Delphi was that there were fumes that came up from this mountaintop that the oracle sat upon, that put the woman, who was like a trance medium, into an altered state of consciousness. And supposedly, here again, she was communing with Apollo. The Delphic oracle was a way that you could make a telephone call, if you will, to the god Apollo and ask his advice. So I think that's a lot of it. I think these people, either through demonic power or through recreational vegetables, so to speak, were able to look into the spirit world and to see these for what at least they chose to look like. Because again, a demon can look like anything. A demon can look like a beautiful woman. A demon can look like a snake or something scary, whatever it needs to look like for the sake of deceiving people.
Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Michael Heiser says that demons can shapeshift. They can change their look, their form, their being, whatever else, and appear to be whatever they want to be.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Rabbis claim that they wear masks. So, which mask are they wearing? So would you agree with that you might be looking at a man or a woman or some other type of a being, and you don't even know what you're looking at?
Yes, absolutely. That's both my experience, but it's also what I teach, over the decades since I became a follower of Yeshua. Yeah.
Incubus, succubus.
I'm a friend of Dr. Heiser, and I really admire his work. We had opportunities to minister together, and I think he really did a lot of good work for the body of Messiah.
Wow. That's really cool.
So
boy.
Now let's run back to the beginning of the slides, which is the election coming up, Dr. Bill. It seems like 1968. So that was the warning. So let me go ahead and click my slides back again to the beginning, and then actually here, hopefully it'll switch. Let me make sure that my mouse is up there. Okay. Oh, hold on. I'll have it ready in just a second. I need it. There it is. Okay. Yep. Okay. Boom, 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 boom. Okay. So basically you're giving the warning, and we're seeing some things that are similar, Dr. Bill. Yes. Martin Luther King was assassinated on 4/4 of 68. RFK on 6/5 of 1968. And then the president stepped down. LBJ became unpopular due to the Vietnam War, and he stepped down. And Humphrey, a Minnesotan, jumped in. He was already the VP, but jumped in to run for the presidency against Nixon. On this year, 2024, which sounds the same, Biden is the president. He steps down because he's unpopular suddenly, and his VP, Harris, is running.
Hello?
It seems that we lost him.
Joel has been raptured.
Yeah, of course,
maybe that was a sign from God. We'll have to just go with that. Yeah. Boy. Well, okay. Too bad we lost Joel. That's unfortunate. But Dr. Bill, you have a lot of information. I would love to just keep, kind of picking your brain here on some of the ancient things, because I really do think there's a lot of connections that probably get buried just through time, through history. They get pushed under the carpet because we think maybe they're not significant. I am very much a stickler that what we find in the book of Revelation, I mean, I didn't know this until maybe 2019-ish. I started digging, and I'm like, why in the world is Satan called a great red dragon? And then I start looking, and I find these similarities with ancient Sumerian, Babylonian kind of literature, Akkadian as well. So I had to brush up on my Sumerian and my Akkadian from my days at the Hebrew University. And, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, because one of the claims, or one of the critiques about the Bible, is that we don't find Satan anywhere in the ancient world. And it's true. You're never going to find Satan anywhere. But once you understand that Satan is Enlil, you find him literally everywhere, right? And you have the same epithets, you have the same characteristics. He's the God that separated heaven and earth. He's the one that held the tablet of destinies. Now, the tablet of destinies, that's where the rubber hits the road, man, because that was stolen from Enlil. Okay, essentially, whoever held the tablet of destinies could control fates and decree the destiny of mankind, right? And so it was Enlil who held the tablet of destinies, and then he bestowed that upon Nimrod, or Ninurta, the Lord of the earth. He bestowed that on his son Ninurta, so that he would then carry that. So I see a direct correlation between Satan and Nimrod, right? Same dudes, same, just different names, but the same guys. Now, as far as I can tell, that tablet of destinies was wrenched out of Satan's hands when Jesus went to the cross. He went down to the grave, and I think he took the keys of Hades and death. All right, and so he now controls that, and that tablet of destinies is sitting at the Father's right hand. Okay, and it's got 7 seals on it. Right, it has not yet been executed, but it is in the possession of the Father. Right, that which had been forfeited is now been bought back by Yeshua, and it's now sitting there waiting for an opportune time to open it. But this is where I think Satan is incredibly clever. He's not going to go down without a fight. He's not just giving up and saying, I'm going to just go to hell. I'm sorry. I'm just going to take people with me. No, guys, he's fighting to win. And I think he has a pretty clever strategy, which is if he can get humanity to give him authority again, well, then he's got a horse in this race. And we see that he's going to have authority. He's going to have that. The book of Revelation tells us that he has authority over the entire earth. Anywhere people live, he's got authority there. The beast was given authority over every tribe, tongue, nation, right? People, right? So we see that very clearly. Where does he get it? Well, this is where, again, he's clever. Remember when the children of Israel were in the wilderness and Balak hires Balaam to come and curse them? What happened? He couldn't do it, right? Because he says, look, they're blessed. I'm sorry, I can't curse them. And then later, you get to chapter 29 of Numbers, and it talks about how the Moabite women came and they seduced the Israelite men to go and worship their gods, which meant to go into the various pagan temples to take part in the temple prostitution, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And that whole thing was a way to get Israel to curse themselves and to give away their authority that they had rightfully given to them by the Lord, to then squander that and forfeit it, and then to go into slavery. So I think what Satan is doing, right? He knows that Jesus has bought back the tablet of destinies. He knows that we believers are free, and to some degree, the world to a certain extent, because Jesus has purchased back the world. I'm not getting into universalism, but I'm not going to go there. But to a greater or lesser extent, Jesus has purchased back the world. And if he can get mankind to say, hey, we want you, Satan, to lead us again, here are the keys. We're giving you authority over us once again. And this is where I think we get to the end times, and you get this incredible crisis. You have so-called aliens showing up. We've been seeing that for the last 70 years, right? There is this spirit of Enlil that has been kind of floating around, and people are into it, are looking for it. But when the 2 witnesses come, I really think they're going to be the catalyst that the world is going to say, hey, we don't like these 2 guys. We don't like your lifestyle and telling us to repent and all this different stuff. And so they're going to look to Enlil, Satan, or, his mask, his I'm a good alien mask that he's probably going to wear. And that is when they will give up their authority. This is what it says in Isaiah chapter 28. Woe to you, scornful man who rule this people in Jerusalem, for you say we've made a covenant with death and Sheol, right? And I think the whole world is going to sign on to that based on 2 Thessalonians and other places. But they're going to sign on to that and basically give away the keys. So all of that to say that I think it's incredibly important to understand this tablet of destinies. And I'm really curious to hear what is your perspective, if you've heard of the tablet of destinies, if that's come up in the Satanism that you were once part of.
Well, not exactly. I mean, there's a lot of conversation about the Emerald Tablet of Hermes Trismegistus, but we know what that had, what's on that. I mean, it was an Egyptian artifact. I've heard of that Tablet of Destiny, but it's not something I've encountered either as an occultist or as a Christian. So no, but I think that's quite intriguing. I know that when I was into the dark side, if you will, the eschatology of Satanism is that the devil believes that if he can keep enough people, human beings, from being saved, from being born again, that there will be this vast army of zombies, if you will, he can raise as an army, so that when Yeshua comes back, the saints, because he thinks there's going to be a lot more evil people than there are saints.
Yeah,
that he can beat Yeshua, regain the throne, and if you will, this Tablet of Destiny, because he's deceived the whole world, as it says in the Revelation.
Yeah.
But what I tell people is the devil overlooks the fact that when you read Revelation, Yeshua doesn't need an army. He just opens up his mouth, and this sword comes out, and, like devastates this 200, million man army, just like that. He doesn't need, we're just sort of there to stand there and go, yay.
It's so cool you talk about the zombie army, because in Revelation 16, and I talk about this in Corrupting the Image Volume 3. Yes, that is a shameless plug to buy the book, guys. Corrupting the Image Volume 3. All right, I got to advertise it somewhere. So, but I talk about zombies because in Revelation 16, if you start looking at, like, their flesh begins to putrefy, right? They cannot die. They want to die, but they can't, according to Revelation 9. What would you call that? I mean, I would call that a zombie, right? Somebody who has death in their flesh, but they don't die. Well, that's a zombie, right? They don't want to be here, but they're kind of stuck because they took the mark of the beast. And Bill, what I do with the mark of the beast, I believe that it's going to be a genetic transformation. I think that goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden. You have the prophecy there where you have, I will cause enmity between you and between your seed and her seed, right? And that's the beginning of this seed war, if you will, that is going to culminate in the last days. I think people are going to latch on to becoming a quote unquote God. They will do this because of the fear that they have of what is coming. I don't think people are just going to be like, I think I'll become a God today, so I'm just going to do this little thing. No, I think it's because they're afraid. They're desperately, terribly afraid of what is coming, namely Jesus. Okay. They may not think it's, Jesus meek and mild, but they think some alien is coming, maybe his name is Jose or Jesus or something, right? But some really nasty alien is coming, and everyone needs to man up. They need to level up. They need to, God up, and they need to get ready to fight this hostile alien force. We see this in movies all the time. If you watch the Avengers, et cetera, and you see this theme all over the place of where humanity has to come together so that we can fight this hostile alien force that's coming. And this is where I think Satan and the beast are going to make available this new hybridized DNA for the world to take to become gods. And it probably works out for a little while, and then it all falls apart, right? And they start becoming zombies. So, yeah.
Well, all I can tell you is, I think that's a very credible scenario. What I was told when I was in all this evil stuff is that they were going to introduce a plague that would be so terrifying. It would be kind of like COVID on steroids. And the people would be terrified enough to take this vaccine, and that this vaccine would transform their DNA into the DNA of Lucifer. It's called FADNA, fallen angel DNA. And it would be a way of mass producing what happened in Genesis 6.
Wow.
Because the Satanists really believe Genesis 6. They know that's a true thing, that, fallen angel, like Dr. Heiser says, fallen angels came down and, had relations with human women and produced, extraordinary men of renown. So that was the plan they had in the 70s. Now I'm sure it's been upgraded, but a lot of people were asking about the COVID thing, because I've been on record about this vaccine thing since the mid 90s. That's when I first started talking about it, when I did the Exposing the Illuminati from Within DVD, or actually back then it was a videotape. And anyway, and they just were, they were saying, well, could COVID be this thing? And I said, well, I don't think so. But I think it's a test run.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I've always thought it was a trial run.
Yeah.
And those who were not compliant, we are definitely marked in the system. I mean, they know that I did not take that jabby jab. I won't give it credit by calling it a V word. Because it wasn't, it's not, and what's coming down the pipeline, like you're talking about, I believe they're going to genetically engineer some modified actual virus, and then have this so-called cure ready to roll out. And people were insane just about COVID, and it was less than 1% dying, and it was only those that generally had the comorbidity conditions, like they already had health problems. Imagine if even 10 or 20% of children started dying, and healthy 20-year-olds and teenagers started dying. And the amount of fear they were able to stoke. No, the amount of fear they were able to stoke in society, and churches shutting down, and the governor of Minnesota saying you can't even go outside. California wouldn't let people go surf. No, you can't go to I can't even go fishing by myself. And most people complied. And if you think you've got rights in America, if that doesn't show you how quickly your rights can be taken away and snuffed out, I just believe that was a test case and a trial run, and by the Joseph Goebbels propaganda machine that is the media, to see what they could do and how easy it was to push the buttons of everybody and get them compliant. And then those of us who did not comply, and did not take the jab, there's no doubt we're already, marked in their system as this person is a problem. Yeah.
I would just add, I think you're right, but I think a ray of hope is that in a way what happened with COVID vaccinated a lot of normies, people that would otherwise, they realize now all this stuff is coming out. People are dropping dead right and left, including babies. I just saw a thing the other day, I think it was Dr. Paul Alexander, where like a 3-day-old baby died of a coronary, just dropped dead, and his mother had the vaccine, the jab, if you will. So I think a lot of people are wising up. And I think the number of people that are just going to be herded like sheep to the slaughter if they bring in this next thing is going to be less. I think they're going to have a lot more trouble, because a lot of people are easily spooked and bamboozled. But a lot of people, especially in America, we're kind of a rebellious bunch. And we don't, once, it's the old saying, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. So, listen, I kind of have to get going.
I do too.
We kind of got a late start, I know, to technical stuff. But anyway, this has been great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can do it again sometime.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We're really glad that you're here. Where can people find you again? Okay.
Well, our website is withonaccord.org, all lowercase. And that's our main nexus point. You can reach us there through email there. My email is schnoebelen@gmail.com, SNEBLEN, which is the way I say my name, not the way it's spelled, at gmail.com. And those would be the two ways to go. We got a lot of stuff, a lot of free resources and things on our website. We're trying to get it upgraded, but that's a process. So
awesome. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Fantastic. Yeah, guys. Hey, so glad that you joined us. I love your comments. We're looking at them. Sometimes we can't get to them. Just that's how the show goes. Hey, if you want to become a producer or you want to sponsor this show, you can go to patreon.com/Doug Ham. And again, give whatever you want to give every month. It makes a big difference. You know, it costs money to have the internet, the lights, all that stuff. It does add up, and it really is awesome. So huge shout out to the patrons already that are been faithfully giving. Really appreciate that. So thank you guys. Again, keep the Regenesis Code story and in prayer. If you know of somebody who maybe is a big donor, you know, wants to really sow some money into this project, this is a way for us to reach hundreds of millions of people. Do you realize that it cost on the average of $2.3 million to put on a Billy Graham crusade? That's a lot of money, right? But people believed it, right? So here we have the opportunity through the medium called movies, right? The big screen, Netflix, whatever you want to call it. We have an opportunity to reach potentially hundreds of millions of people with a story that is kingdom centered, but it's not that cheesy, you know, churchianity, PureFlix kind of stuff. Okay, no offense to PureFlix, but our goal is not to reach the Christians. Our goal is to reach non-believers. Okay, and we want to show them essentially what's going to come. Now, my vision isn't perfect by any stretch, but it's a pretty good interpretation. All right. So check out the Regenesis Code. You can get it on Amazon, or you can listen to it free right here on YouTube, read by yours truly. And, you know, let's make this happen, guys. I know we can do it. All right. I know we can do it. And I've been telling God, it's time to get going. Right. In the words of King David, wake up, let's get going. Right. So, I'm encouraging you guys. Let's get going. Let's get going on this. I cannot do it alone. I need your help. So let's make this reality. So excited. Always great to be with you guys. God bless you. Until next time, take care.